What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the stream. It's Tuesday, so it's time to get tactical. And today I'm with my very good friend Zach Point, who recently is coming off of his Adepticon 2022 win and has deigned to grace us with his presence on the stream today. Zach, how's it going?
It is going excellently.
Good, yeah. Still riding high after taking down one of the biggest conventions of the year.
Yeah, what a thrill. Not something I expected to do, so I still feel very good about it.
Yeah, absolutely fair enough. So today we're just gonna introduce ourselves to Zach. We're gonna get Zach to talk a little bit about the army that he played at the tournament, the very controversial army that he likes to take, which is a very big part of the discourse around Warhammer 40k right now, especially competitively. But I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about the games that he played against and the opponents that he took down, and I think we should get into it. Before we go too far, I do want to do a couple shout outs. First off, we're doing another Throwdown Thursday this Thursday. Should be against Adeptus Mechanicus today, so it's going to be an in-person battle report. I'm upgrading the technology of the stream a little bit, so super excited to do that. You can tune in to that 7 p.m. Thursday, U.S. Eastern Time. That's going to be on the YouTube channel, and I'm pretty psyched. We also, this week, if you're into competitive play online, we have signups for our April GT are closing. So get on in there, ! Discord in the chat. If you're not in the Discord already, you can find all of the information to sign up there, over there. And it's going to be a 5-round GT. You play one round per week, and you get T5S2 standings points. There'll be prizes at the end and door prizes as well for people who play all the way through. So super good time. Zach, I know you play a lot on the server, so hopefully we'll see you there.
I'm excited. I wrote it down.
Oh, good. Perfect. Now, for those who don't know, Zach and I kind of go way back, because we used to play War Machine and Hordes together over in Pandemonium Books and Games in Cambridge, Massachusetts, ages and ages and ages ago. We would grind for War Machine tournaments, and now we're off to the land of 40k. Zach plays a lot on the server as well, on the T5S2 events that we run over there, and hopefully he's been having a good time. I would hope so. Certainly,
great time.
The practice has certainly paid off. Yeah,
I actually I play mostly online. That's kind of the only way I can get like 2+ games a weekend, and it's hugely beneficial because otherwise you gotta lug all your stuff around. And you play one game on a Sunday. It's not enough.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely the setup and breakdown on TTS is like where the huge time savings are. There's no travel involved. It's pretty nice. Yeah, so we just wanted to ask you a couple questions about how you got started in the hobby, how long you've been playing 40k, where you got your start in miniature gaming in general, and Warhammer 40,000 in specific. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of us, I painted models and played around a little bit when I was a youngin' in high school, but never very seriously. And then more recently, when COVID started, I'm stuck at home and I'm looking for something to do, so I picked up some models and started painting them, and I really caught the bug and got sucked in there. And as of course you mentioned, we played War Machine and Hordes fairly competitively back in Boston. And that is definitely where I kind of got my interest in competitive wargaming, and only now, of course, manifesting in 40k.
Yeah, fair enough. So you got mostly started, at least playing, I guess, in War Machine and Hordes, and then kind of moved to 40k from there?
Yeah, that's right. I remember really being interested in the competitive scene, and it was a vibrant game when we were playing it, I think, back in the day. And then moving out to DC here, and like looking for folks to play with, and not be a little disappointed because there were many War Machine folks, but it was a great 40k scene, so that is where I ended up, as you might expect.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting because it's a little bit of, I think, of the opposite journey that a lot of people played. A lot of people have started with 40k and then moved to other things and then maybe moved back. But I can definitely understand that starting with War Machine and Hordes gives you kind of that, you're already in that competitive mindset, because that game was very competitive.
I miss it still.
Yeah, for sure. Now that you've graduated over to 40k, what would you consider to be either your main army that you play or your favorite army that you've played in the game?
Yeah, I'm elves all the way. So I actually got started with Harlequins in my first army purchase in 8th edition. But Harlequins, Dark Eldar, Craft Worlds, I love them all. I collect them all, and my plan to stay competitive is just to have every elf, and you can play whatever elf is best at the time, and you can kind of switch around, but still be loyal to the elves in general.
Yeah, that's been a pretty good plan so far for at least in 9th edition. They've been having a good time over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's not so bad.
Now, you mentioned competitive play is mostly where you're at. Would you say that that's sort of your favorite aspect of the hobby? And within the sphere of competitive play, what's your favorite component? Are you a list builder? Are you a tactician? What stage of that competition is your favorite realm to exist in?
I love playing it. I'm tactics, execution all the way. I won't lie. I have, I'm sure, hundreds, too many hours, like list building, reiterating lists, building new lists. But definitely the most fun I have is at the table playing the game. It's a blast every time.
Yeah, kind of that mechanical execution.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So absolutely understandable. I think I'm kind of with you there. And being a primarily Eldari player, I imagine that kind of especially leaning into the mechanics of that play style, you would want to be playing like this faster sort of finesse oriented game. Is that your favorite style of game plan to execute in 40k?
Yes. My wife actually, she does Krav Maga, and they have a saying that I really like that I think it applies. And their saying is surprise, speed, violence. And I love that. That's everything I want. You want to be fast, you want to be, janky and unpredictable, and then strike. But if you make a mistake, then you get punished pretty hard. That's definitely my preference.
Yeah, definitely. Seems like that's certainly the faction to pick for that. Absolutely. So today we're talking about Adepticon 2022, the Adepticon Championships. This was a 300-player tournament. I think after drops, it ended up with 256. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Yeah. And interestingly, I actually kind of liked the format of the event. It was 2 days. It was Thursday, Friday, which is a little bit weird. Normally, you play Saturday, Sunday, but Adepticon's a big tournament, and they got to put it somewhere. But it was 4 rounds a day, and I know you and I are pretty acclimated to 4 rounds a day after some tournament grinding for War Machine and Hordes. How did you feel about that pace of play? I know it's pretty controversial for 40k players.
I am a big fan. I'm a big fan because people have places to be, and if you want to get to a single undefeated, which I think is the best way to play, then it's kind of what you have to do unless you want to take 4 days to do an event. That said, I won't lie that as a younger person, it probably advantages me against maybe some of our other players in the hobby. So there's a question there about maybe fairness, but I love 4 games a day. I did feel like someone had punched me in the gut when I woke up on day 3 after playing 8 games over 2 days, but it's worth it.
Yeah, that's understandable. And you said you traveled back on Saturday, right? So
yeah,
it was just a whirlwind event.
Yeah, because I didn't. Call me a pessimist, but I didn't know whether I would make day 2. And in the Adepticon setup, if you don't make top 16, there's a cutaway, so you can then go enjoy the con and do other things. But I wanted to get back and stop paying for a hotel room if I wasn't going to use it, so I made my plans to stay and then leave after day 1. And it turns out that I did make day 2, so I had to quickly extend my stay at the hotel and try and find some Rube Goldberg machine to get back home, which involved flying to Baltimore and driving down from Baltimore to DC, but it worked out in the end.
Yeah, But then, you still have the whole weekend ahead of you, right? So, or
That's true,
I guess
yeah.
most of the weekend, even after playing through it, an entire 40k super major. So,
Yeah. If you really want the vibe, I got home, met up with my friends, we had a great congratulations, and then we sat down for a game of Twilight Imperium. So it was a lot of fun.
oh man,
Yeah, yeah,
talk about out of the frying pan into the fire there. Yeah,
exactly.
we're off of like 16, or like 30 straight hours of 40k directly into a game of Twilight Imperium.
Yeah. I don't know if you
Perfect.
guys know this about me, but I love board games and board games. So, now you know.
Yeah, I think definitely evidenced by the amount of play and obviously your success. So there you go. Now, some other things about the event, it used player-placed terrain, which I know is still kind of an ongoing discussion amongst the community. And I know that there were some, there was a little bit of concern about the level of terrain that was available at the event, at least for some of the table setups. Some of them looked very well terrained out, but some of them looked a little sparse. Can you talk a little bit about the terrain at the event and how it impacted your game plan and how what you thought about the player place terrain system?
Yeah, the first thing I should say is that the tournament organizers at Adepticon did a phenomenal job. Really professional, really well set up. Definitely, terrain's really important in ninth edition 40k, and I'll agree with the folks that said there probably wasn't enough on some tables. I try to be cognizant of the fact that they need a lot of tables of terrain, right? 300 people playing in one event that is simultaneously taking place with other events that they need terrain for, like Age of Sigmar or whatever. There's only so much you can do. Uh, that said, player place terrain really helps solve that problem. All things being equal, the GW standard terrain, that's just the best I've ever seen. I think it's the best. I think it helps neutralize just dominant shooting armies. It's super fun. It's dynamic. But you can't ask every event to just all of a sudden turn around and churn out 150 tables of new terrain. So player placed is kind of the best of what I've seen that helps mitigate that problem, and I think it really helped.
Yeah, and I will say as well, to that point, I'll see if I can find some images of them, but the terrain that they had there on some of the tables, it was a little sparse, but all of the layouts that I saw were gorgeous.
Yeah.
Especially for an event of this scale. This is the same size as something like the London GTs of yore that had some maybe not super great terrain setups. And these guys, the Adepticon team certainly put in the time to create some absolutely gorgeous looking competitive layouts.
Beautiful stuff.
Yeah. Let's see if I can find some. I know that some got posted on Twitter.
Yeah, they had these crystal ice boards that were great. Like ruins that were really well made. Like they had shading on them. Like,
Yeah.
as soon as you see terrain that's like any step beyond the bare minimum, I feel like for terrain, when you're trying to really churn it out, you can really tell, and it makes a difference. And all of it was a lot of effort was put in. You can tell someone really loved that stuff.
Yeah, I know there's this Necron style layout that has, I think, these laser cuts from somewhere. I think you can get those in MDF, the Necron, like obelisks there as obscuring terrain, but super nice looking boards. And I know the stream tables were all, and I don't have a picture of those unfortunately, the stream tables all had the sort of classic GW ruins, but they were all marbled out, so they had like a lot of freehanding on the ruins themselves, which absolutely looked incredible. So that's cool to see. At least regardless of the level of terrain there, at least it looked good.
Yeah, no, it was all very beautiful.
Yeah. All right, but let's talk about what we're here for. Let's talk about your games and your list. So you took a variation of the Harlequin list to Adepticon. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the list consists of and why you elected to take this variety of elves to the event?
Yeah, so Harlequins, the new book is very strong. No one should pretend that they're not excellent. There are definitely, and we can talk about this in a second, but there are definitely ways to counter like what's out there. But the short version is the Void Weaver. Probably not a huge surprise because there's I think like 8 data sheets in the whole Harlequin section of the book, but that one's the best one. And it's good specifically because it's exceptionally fast. it shoots pretty good, but it's just almost impossible for any traditional statted gun in the game to be efficient into, just because of no rerolls to hit. So that's obviously your primary way that a lot of people, multiply damage. -1 to hit, which combined with no rerolls means that you're just often at the very best situation, you're hitting on a 4. So half of your shots are missing. And then the 4 pinball means that half of your shots are after that are going to fail to get through. So at the very best, you're looking at a statistical average of a quarter of your shots make it through, and that's if you wound. And of course, Harlequins have luck of the Laughing God, so they can reroll some of those saves to make it like 12.5% chance that a shot gets through. So if you're ever shooting a gun that's supposed to deal high damage, aka kill a tank, it's going to be extremely inefficient at getting all the way through to the bottom.
Yeah, so that T5 6 wounds 4-up save is belies the fact that these are some of the most difficult vehicles in the game to kill. And for only 90 points, that's pretty good, especially since the profile on these guns is pretty strong. Either the 2-shot strength 12, 2d3 damage, or the 3d3 strength 5, 8p3 shots. It's almost like it has alternatively both profiles of a Necron Heavy Destroyer, basically, and like stuck together.
Yeah, I don't worry too much about it.
Yeah, pretty good. But also, obviously, you have a lot of the Harlequin infantry sort of to play your primary objective game there. If there is one thing that the Void Weavers don't do, it's hold objectives particularly well, because it's only 9 models. I mean, they're 9 impossible to kill models that are very fast, so they're still not bad at it.
They're good, but
yeah.
yeah, no, that's a good point. The 9 Void Weavers make up about half the list, right? So almost 1,000 points. And they basically guarantee that you are the best directional shooting army in the game, right? I can't imagine what you could run up against and would be better than that. So you can basically say, like, you have no outside of line of sight, but when it comes to walking out in the middle of the board and shooting at each other, you will just always win. And so from there, you have to try and develop a way to actually get objectives, because if there's objectives behind terrain, right, you just don't really have a solution to that. And the Harlequin book did this kind of interesting 180, where in 8th edition it was this excellent janky melee book that had like a lot of damage, and in 9th edition now it's a shooting book. They have melee units, but because I guess in Harlequin land they developed a way to turn off rerolls, no Harlequin's ever invented a way to give rerolls. So there's just no way for a bunch of guys that are either strength 3 or strength 4 in melee to really efficiently pick stuff up. So you're mostly there to try and get a bunch of trash that's hard to kill, that's OBSEC, that runs out and steals objectives. And that's what you got. You got the maximum number in a single battalion of 5-man dudes. I have some extra points, so some of them are 6-mans that help a little bit when it comes to stratagems that deal a couple of mortal wounds. But just as many as you can, more than you have boats, so they can just stand there and then sprint forward, take an objective, die. Run forward, take an objective, die. That's their only mission. And then some characters, which I can go into, but I suppose I should pause there.
Yeah, and it's especially important to talk about the fact that Harlequins have always been some of the best users of transports in the game. They for a little while they were superseded by Drukhari, but it sounds like the pendulum has maybe swung back a little bit in the Harlequins' favor. Because you have these Star Weavers that are basically exactly as hard to kill as the Void Weaver. And if you end up killing them, 5 or 6 objective secure dudes spill out of it. So even if you're just running up the table with these Star Weavers and your opponent can somehow find a way to kill them, if they can't also clear the Harlequin troop that's sitting in there and is going to disembark onto the objective or emergency disembark into an annoying place, then they've basically made the game harder for themselves, because when it comes back to your turn, you're probably still holding that objective, or you've even stolen it from them.
Yeah, and the Harlequins themselves, unlike a lot of Drukhari models, are also hard to kill, because they also have the 4-up invul save. And then the Sergeant, and you'll see this in the list, none of my lead players in any of these squads have any weapons of any kind, but they all have 2 wounds. And what basically that means is that there's a secret rule in every Harlequin troop datasheet that says the first 1 damage weapon that you fail a save on does no damage, because the Sergeant just takes that wound off every time.
Yeah, and that's new in the new codex. Harlequin troops never had a unit champion before, if I remember correctly. But now they have like this little mini Exarch guy who runs around and eats damage for them.
And he has not better leadership, he's not better attacks, which is good. Like, they shouldn't have made him amazing. That would have been too much.
Yeah.
But it does mean that he just dies every time. He never has a pistol, he never has a melee weapon. Just the first to fall when the transport explodes, he dies first. When someone shoots a bolt gun at you, he dies first, every time.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. And being in a ablative wound just makes that unit a little bit harder to kill. Like you said, the focus of the troop is not now, getting full wound rerolls and +1 damage and fighting twice and doing all these chicanerous things that they used to do in the previous version of the faction. But now it is just standing in your opponent's way and being annoyingly difficult to remove while objective securing their objectives away.
Yeah. Yeah, they have a couple ways to do damage. There's 2 squads in there that are just dudes. The minimum cost that stand on objectives. There's 2 squads in there that are 6-man squads, and they have just 2 melee weapons. One that gives you access to the stratagem that when you charge, for every model in the unit on a 4-up, you can do a mortal, and that's why there's 6 of them in there. And one that's for every 6 to wound, regardless of whether you have the melee weapon or not, you do a mortal wound, and that's why there's a bunch of just guys with blades that get +1 attack. So if you really need to pump them, they can put out like an average of 6 or so mortal wounds for 2 CP over 2 stratagems. So they have some access to that. And then the last 2 squads... Oh, go ahead.
No, that sounds good.
Yeah. The last 2 squads have a couple of fusion pistols. And these are just if you really just need to get something dead. They can go over there. They take the 2 shooty characters that are in this list in that same boat. And those boats can just gang up on someone and just blat a bunch of pistols into them and usually kill them.
Yeah. And that's a good segue, because you mentioned the characters before, and you have 4 characters in this list, is that right?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the loadouts that these guys have?
Yeah, I love me some Hero Hammer. So I'll always invest in a good character, even if it opens up Assassinate. You got 4. The 3 of them are just supposed to kill stuff. You have your Troop Master, he's your Warlord. He has Foot in the Future, which is a phenomenal Warlord trait. It basically says when you advance, you get D3 plus 3 instead of D6 inches, which is fine. But more importantly, whenever you charge, you get plus 6 inches to your charge. So you could basically always make a 12-inch reliable charge. And that means that guy, because he's a Harlequin and they have the Harlequin infantry rules where they move through intervening models when they charge, that guy can get anywhere he wants to go and just scalpel out anything he needs. And then the rest of it just helps his damage, right? He's got the relic, the Shagarax Rose relic, which makes him damage 3, reroll wounds. And he has the additional Warlord trait, something that you can spend some CP on in Harlequins, for +1 strength, +1 attack, just to get 7 attacks, be a little more reliable. That guy kills characters, man. He kills characters. He gets there no matter what you do, and he kills characters. And when he's not doing that, he has a fusion pistol, and he hangs out in the boat with the other guys with the fusion pistol.
Yeah. Those little Smash Troop Masters, the little Smash Masters,
Yep.
are always super problematic, I think, for your opponent, because not only do they move through things, but also an important thing to remember is that all of the Harlequins are on 25 mil bases. So it's so hard to actually physically stop them from getting in where they need to go, because they'll just be like, oh, I'll charge everything around you, and then fit into a tiny crevice in your castle, and then that guy just gets in there and starts beating people up.
And there's a Harlequin stratagem also to, when you consolidate, jump back in a transport. So he can get out of his transport, go really, really far and charge. His transport can come with him, charge first to absorb any overwatch that might be out there, and then, instead of being hit back, he can just hop back in his transport and become a problem for later. And I'm sure people can kill the transport. They can probably make a way to do it, but you got to get through 6 wounds with a 4-up invul save, and then he hops out, and he himself has a 4-up invul save. So all of a sudden, if it swings just a little bit, you can end up with a random Troop Master still alive, and then it happens all over again.
Yeah, for sure. He continues the rampage.
Exactly. Forever.
Yeah. and then he, you're trying to engage him. He luck of the laughing gods out of getting killed, and then consolidates back into a different transport, and then jumps to the other side of the table. Yeah, it's a tale as old as time, I think, is trying to pin those idiots down.
That's that good jank. I love it. Good elf jank.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah. So then you have the Shadow Seer in there. That's mostly to protect your guys on the ground, I imagine.
Yeah, she's just defensive. She opens up the ability to take the psychic secondaries if you really, really need it. but more importantly, she has Mirror Architect, which is an upgrade that gives you an aura of -6-inch range for everything that's shooting. I won't go into the, I'm sure, very finicky rules discussion, but it basically gives -6 range to anything tied to a shooting attack. At Adepticon, they ruled that this is just the range of guns, nothing else. I think the actual ruling with the way this comes out is it also affects anything that's tied to that gun.
Yeah.
So something like Mont Ka, it would give 6-inch range debuff to, or Farsight Enclaves being within 12, having a free marker light. When it affects those things, it's super, super important because those things are usually very short range. They're usually very powerful. And if you just can't do them, 6 inches doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a big, big deal. And it, of course, affects anything that's a high damage, low range gun, like a fusion gun or a melt-a-gun. And that's going to really, really make a big difference when you're talking about your giant clump of 9 Void Weavers that get to be exposed to 24 inches away for all their guns. Now they are 24, but technically speaking, they're kind of 30. And that starts to create a problem where you have to over-invest in order to get them.
Right. Yeah. So the kind of awkward ruling there is because the ability, if I remember correctly, it's while performing ranged attacks, these units are treated as 6 inches farther away.
I think so.
From the attacking model. So basically, like, as soon as you activate a unit in the shooting phase, you take everything that's within 6 inches of the shadow sphere and you shove it 6 inches backwards. You know, not physically. They don't actually move, but that's what the rules treat them as. Which means that, like you said, your offensive auras and range finders and stuff like that should be affected. But, you know, we haven't gotten any FAQs in the Harlequin Codex yet, obviously, so we don't know what the intention is. But that is how, that is how it rules is written.
And FAQs, I'm sure, are coming because her other aura is for all core or character models within 6 inches of her. She goes -1 to wound. This affects 0 models because troops are not, in fact, core in the original printing of the book.
Perfect.
So
that's just perfect codex release.
Yeah. It's just a paragraph. It's on her data sheet. It does nothing. I'm sure they'll fix that though.
It affects Skyweavers. You didn't take any Skyweavers though. Was that an oversight on your list building?
I think Skyweavers are great. They're just not as great as a Void Weaver. Turns out.
Wow.
Yeah, which is a bummer. I mean, Skyweaver, I'm sure will come up when an FAQ comes out and things kind of change. I wouldn't throw away your Skyweavers. Hold on to them because I'm sure they'll be valuable. Just not this very minute because Void Weavers are where it's at.
Yeah, for sure. Now, can you talk a little bit about the inclusion of the Solitaire and also the combo that you have on the Death Jester as well? Because I know that's the Death Jester combo is like a little bit of an involved thing.
Yeah, I'll do the Solitaire first because he's a little bit simpler. For the most part, in 90% of matchups, he's a guy with a 3-up invul save, and you have access to reroll multiple saves per round, so he's just mega annoying. He can blitz, which is an ability on his datasheet, lets him roll 2 dice instead of 1 when advancing. I guess technically speaking, he doesn't advance, he blitzes, but it makes him go really fast. He flies off, kills hopefully a character, or maybe a little 5-man squad of dudes in the corner, and then he's very challenging to remove, and it becomes a problem from there. That's usually what he is, and for 110 points, that's good. It doesn't blow anyone away, but it's good. What he's mostly there for is the Harlequin mirror match, and maybe Craft Worlds as well, because he has the Caress keyword. He can take the 2 CP ignore invul saves stratagem. Now, he's AP3, which is good into plenty of people. It'll help you kill characters. But for the mirror match, and Harlequins I think are something you're going to run into a lot. Hint, there were 3 mirror matches that I ran into. That basically means they have no save. And he just blows stuff up. And he runs in, he kills 3 Void Weavers on his own, he makes over double his points back in value, and then he's still a guy with a 3-up invul save. So mostly that's what he's there for.
Yeah, so sometimes he doesn't die on the swing back, and then
yes.
The Troop Master thing happens again.
Yeah. And this is kind of the case with all the Harlequin stuff, because you have this bucket of rerolls. Whenever someone allocates attacks, they can never just do like, this is the average it takes to kill them, I'll spend that average. They always have to overinvest, which means they're losing value. Because if they go a little bit under average on the shooting, and then you spend a couple of rerolls, you know, Harlequin at 1 wound, or like a Solitaire at 1 wound is just as valuable as a Solitaire at 5 wounds. So that's a problem. You can't let that happen.
Yeah, for sure. You want to talk about the Death Jester a little bit?
Deafy the Jester. Speaking of reliability,
He's got a nickname already.
oh yeah, Deafy the Jester every time. He's interesting also well into the mirror, but I'll go over kind of the way his warlord trait works because it's a little weird. He's got the Harvester of Torment upgrade, which basically just means every 6 he rolls to hit explodes 3 additional times. So a 6 is 4 hits. That's like pretty neat on its own. He himself is kind of fine. He is just a guy with a cool shuriken cannon, so he has 3 shots, strength 6, AP 2, damage 2. But the real trick is there's a warlord trait that he can take that gives him the ability to turn one of his hits into a 6. You can actually turn it one of any hit roll, I think wound roll or save roll, into a 6. But for him, it'll always be a hit. And that means you can reliably say, hey, I'm going to get 4 hits, right? Because I'll roll, if I ever roll a 1, because he hits on a 2 up, that 1 becomes a 6, and then I get 4 hits. And if something else is a 6, then yay, that's great too. And then I get a bunch of hits, and I get 8 hits, 7 hits. I can't do math. So he's really reliable. Just like a shuriken cannon that can just land between 4 and 8 hits is really, really good. And critically, again, into the mirror match, Shadow Seers, in order to have their aura affect people, need to be on the ground. They can't be in a transport. And that means that his ability to ignore character protection, something he has on his datasheet as well, is really valuable in that specific matchup. For whatever reason, most other armies have bodyguards, so that datasheet rule does mostly nothing into most other matchups. But in those matchups, he's just a guy with a 2 damage gun. But specifically into the mirror, he can threaten Shadow Seers specifically, which is really, really valuable.
Yeah, I know that gun getting the upgrade to 2 damage is a really big deal for that guy, because it was always really silly that he could shoot characters with the 1 damage, like AP0.
Yeah, but he like literally is incapable of killing them, even if every shot hits and wins. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely great.
The last thing I'll say about him is a specific technique, the relic he has. This never once came up, but this is maybe skipping a little bit ahead. Harlequin rules are very, very strong, no doubt about it. One of, if not the best way to beat them is mortal wounds. Because at the end of the day, they are paying some points in order to have an impulse save and -1 to hit, and for the vehicles, no rerolls to hit. But they're just vehicles with 6 wounds. And the guys on the ground are just guys with 1 wound. Mortal wounds get around all of that kind of stuff. And so this is a relic that gives this guy an aura of 6 inches for a 5 feel no pain against mortal wounds. So into a matchup where someone has brought those mortal wounds, he hops onto the ground, and he just kind of like holds his hands out and tries to hug everyone he can, and mitigate that as much as possible. I was really thankful that I didn't see a lot of mortal wound spam, but if you do run into it, like a really teched out Thousand Suns player or a Crusher Stampede player that gets a lot of breakthroughs in, that can be really dangerous. He's the one way to mitigate that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know correct me if I'm wrong, but you can, if the Jester's on the ground, you can Blade Storm him too, right? So he gets an additional hit on the explosion?
Yes, yeah, he can Blade Storm to get even more hits.
It's good stuff.
Which is just fun. If you really need to kill a character, that's what you do. You Blade Storm, grab another hit, and then you start re-rolling with your Laughing God re-rolls to make sure everything lands.
Yeah, just
good.
Yeah, you could go fishing for 6s a little bit there too, I guess, with the re-rolls.
Yeah, if you really want to get someone, you Blade Storm, and then you roll 1 die. If it's not a 6, you spend a re-roll, you try and find another 6. And then if you, oh no, I re-rolled into a 1, don't worry, that becomes a 6 because it was Warlord trait. And you just do that for every die and try and find 2 or 3 6s, and you can kill, shield captains.
Yeah, seems pretty good. But again, that's only if he's on the ground. He can't do that from the transport because you can't use threats on him.
Correct,
Yeah. All right. Now, I know you covered a little bit about particular technology for especially the mirror match, but was there any other particular concessions that you made to either the meta game and the format of the event, or other armies that you were expecting to see when you came to build your list?
That's the majority of it. I will say, having known what I know now, I would have teched even more into the mirror. Because, like the Harlequins mirror, but also into craft worlds, a lot of them are reliant on invul saves, so more things that ignore invul saves. So I would put more mortal wounds in my list, neuro disruptors or little pistols that can do mortals. That's my new iteration runs those, and then you can upgrade the Troop Master to ignore mortals on a 5 or 6 to wound. Anything that ignores mortals really helps into the mirror match. So those are the things I would have added, but I did not think to do that.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I think we can move on. We'll just go through a little bit of a brief discussion about each of the opponents that you played and how those games went. Starting with round one, you had Tau Empire.
Yeah. El Clasico, my roommate plays Tau, so I was very equipped for this matchup. And the short answer is it's pretty much impossible to have a gun in the game that hits on fives that is going to be efficient unless you have a ridiculous amount of them. Looking at you, orcs. Tau hit on fours normally. When they get -1 to hit, they go to hitting on fives. They are very reliant on rerolls, which they don't get into the vehicles. And then if they get a marker light on you and they get an angle, then you pop your -1 to hit stratagem and they go back to fives, and they're sad.
Yep.
And that's kind of how that matchup goes. Even with lots of outside of line outside shooting, this guy brought a ton of AFP, and he definitely put on the hurt. I mean, it's painful, the kind of stuff Tau can put out. But once you turn off rerolls, that's a lot of where they're getting their value from, and it's very challenging for them to beat you on attrition. And so just make sure every troop stays in a boat, pull them all away, use your -6-inch range buff to make sure your troops don't just get blown up by AFP, and you can shoot them with shuriken cannons, and it's very challenging for them to out-attrition you. So I took very defensive secondaries, stood in my corner, kind of refused to overexpose, and eventually they have to kind of grind through, and you end up with more models than them at the end.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Now, moving into the future as the meta kind of iterates to respond to Harlequins, do you expect to see more Tau lists that run Flamer Bombs, potentially, to try to deal with the Harlequin menace, or does the Mirror Architect make that a little bit too inconsistent?
Mirror Architect's a real challenge for that. I do think one Flamer Bomb is good, especially in Tau Sept, because Tau Sept can get like +1 to wound and reroll to wound. I guess they can all get reroll to wound, but +1 to wound on Flamers gets pretty wild.
Yeah.
So I think one of them is good, but definitely because they go to 6-inch range with Mirror Architect, once they go out there, they're not coming back. They're done. So you'll probably see one in most lists. The real tech, though, is the Velocity Tracker. Which is just a flat +1 to hit against things that fly, and every Harlequin vehicle flies, and that takes you back to hitting on fours, and then you can start to really do some work, and that can add up very quickly.
Yeah, I know I've started to see those sort of filter back in. I know there was advanced targeting systems were exciting for a while, and target locks especially to ignore light cover, but obviously Harlequins don't really care about cover that much, so if that's really what you're worried about, that Velocity Tracker makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I think it's the way to go, honestly. And a lot of other things that you care about fly as well. It's a keyword that's out there a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it makes my thropes sad.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, Andreas in chat pointing out you could switch from Tau Sept or Farsight, I guess, to Borkon, and then you get an extra 4 inches range.
Yes, this is a really good note. I suspect that Andreas is probably my roommate, Andreas. We've been teching out this matchup a lot. Borkon is great because you get an ignore invul save strat, which,
solid,
as we know, is the answer. And they have -1 strength against range attacks, and all shuriken cannons are strength 6. All battlesuits are toughness 5, and all of a sudden, you go to wounding on 4s, which you'll still take damage, but it's a big improvement. And of course, it helps counter that Mirror Architect. So I really recommend Borkon. That's a great note.
Yeah. It's kind of cool to see the different Tau Septs like being brought in, because I know, there was like the triple Storm Surge list when the book dropped in Borkon, which I don't know. I never. It was okay, I guess.
That's fine.
Little too eggs and baskety for my taste, I think. But I know that there is a lot of interesting combinations in the other Tau Seps besides just classic Tau and Farsight, which is what everybody took. And it's nice that at least the faction has a little bit of flexibility, and it's not just like drop 9 broadsides and hope that sees you through.
Yeah, and critically also with Borkon. Having a 12-inch range flamer going to 6 means you can no longer deep strike and shoot it because you have to be 9 inches away. But if you add 4 inches of range, you go back to range 10, and then you can deep strike fire, and that lets you get the alpha off a little bit better because the Void Weavers are very fast, so it's very challenging to hide your crisis suits.
Yep.
Which is another big flip point that can be very helpful.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we can move on. Round 2, you are up against a little bit more of an off-meta army. We Justin Longston and his blood axes, which is interesting, I guess.
Yeah, this guy, he was having a great time. He was a great opponent. A real blast to play against Justin. Shout out to Justin, because he was a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a good one. This is basically like a deep strike list. He starts like on the board with 2 trucks, with some truck boys in it, and a couple of characters, and like that's pretty much it. And everything else either is in reserves, or he redeploys into reserve using, I think, a warlord trait. And so there's just not much to get to grips with, right? You can come onto the middle and shoot some trucks if you want. Good for you. And then on turn 2 or 3, just like 2 Docket Jets and 2 squads of Storm Boys come in, and the the Mega Knobs that were hiding in the corner get dejumped in as well, and just everything just appears. And you know, like the Storm Boys have an ability to make a charge out of Deep Strike become a 7 instead of a 9. And I think a giant unit of Killicans that's reserved has a stratagem to roll 3 dice, and then the rest of them, like, you know, you roll enough 9-inch charges, some of them will make it.
Yeah,
and there's
you get those rerolls built in, right?
Exactly, yeah.
For here we go.
So that's really cool, and you can like get a bunch of damage in, and then like be on all the objectives and be really challenging. I think it was a cool list. I will say, the Light Sadith has a stratagem. Their special stratagem is spend 1 CP when you are declared a charge on, and then move 6 inches.
Yeah.
And then your opponent can redeclare charges. That is really a problem if you're playing as a deep strike, because you're 9 inches away from the closest thing, so pretty much one thing usually. And if that one thing then moves 6 inches, you're not making that charge.
Right.
And that's basically what happened in this matchup. Like, I basically had 9 Void Weavers cluster up into the middle and then be surrounded by like a couple of troops and transports, so that the closest thing was those troops or those transports. So just none of the guys deep striking could get to grips with the Void Weavers or the characters. And like the one that really could try and make it, all of a sudden you light stratagem, that one's not making it. And then it's tough because orcs I don't think do super well when you're shooting at them and they're just kind of hanging out in the open once they deep struck.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that T5 profile turns out was not actually that exciting.
Yeah, not the strength.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that does sound like a super cool list, and especially because, you know, it sounds like everything on the table is going to be mostly truck boys, right? So they also get to move and then disembark. So especially with player place terrain, you can set yourself up a safe position for your trucks to hide behind, and then as soon as it's time for you to pounce on your opponent, they can run out. And then the boys.
Yeah, they're moving like 30 inches. They're getting where they want to go.
Right. Yeah, and then everything comes out of reserve. Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a very cool list for sure.
Nice to see people doing new stuff in orcs.
Yeah. And that put you into round 3 against Lester Westmoreland, which I don't know what he played because he didn't post his list online. So
yeah, he is an old-fashioned guy, and he walked over and handed me a paper sheet with his Drukhari army.
There you go, Drukhari.
And I love also thinking of new things in Drukhari, but I will say it was just a Blackheart battalion. Blackheart is super cool in Drukhari. It's neat. It gives you the ability to re-roll all your Dark Lances to hit. That is not so good. It's no re-roll. Yeah. And he ran like, I think 3 Ravagers and 5 Raiders with a Trueborn and a bunch of like Cavalites with other guns in them. And it was also a bit of a blow that he didn't go first. I went first, and he can hide everything, so I got to blow up a bunch of Ravagers, and then he shoots back, and like he's shooting like something like 8 or so Dark Lances. Half of them hit, so 4 hits. 3 of them wound, and then I make 1 save, so 2 of them go through. I re-roll the failures, so 1 of them goes through. He rolls 5 damage, and he has failed to kill a single model with all of his Dark Lances. That's not a good place to be. Dark Lances hated 4 pinfall saves in the first place.
Yeah.
They hate it even more when they're hitting on 4s.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been my experience too. It feels like as brutal, this time last year as Dark Lances were looking at, the Drukhari armies of the day that would run like 10 or 12 Dark Lances and how terrifying it was. The defensive profiles have definitely pushed such that the Dark Lance is no longer as scary as it was. It helps also that Raiders are like 25 points more than they were. So
Yeah. Well, back when, a single raider cost as much as a single Harlequin transport, it's maybe a more comparable thing, but
Right. Yeah.
they don't anymore. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's I do like to see Drakari still putting in the results because I think that um, there's still some play left in the faction, but it certainly is
definitely.
much less scary than it was a while ago.
I would say the faction has a lot of play. I also play Drakari. I love Drakari. They're just a little bit more in line, I think, with a lot of the other like general 2021 factions, and that's kind of I think where you want factions to be. So that's not a bad thing. Um, but there's a bit of a mismatch when you look at I think Custodies and Tau and now Craft Worlds and Harlequins.
Yeah. So that put us into our first of the mirror matches.
Yes, it
Right?
begins
In round 4. This is Eric Forsman playing also the Harlequin list. This one had a little bit different. He had 5-star Weavers instead of 4. So,
Yes, that's a continuing theme you'll see is that all the mirror matches they ran more transports, fewer guys, but otherwise it's very similar. Like I generally had a couple more pistols than them, but yeah, the mirror match is interesting. I now I guess would consider myself a Harlequin mirror match expert, and it goes like this: you roll to go first. The player going first spends 2 CP, phantasms, all Void Weavers up to the line. Those Void Weavers then boost forward and try and do as much damage as they can on turn 1 because there's just no universe where you're hiding, your 13 or 14 vehicles. You're going to get shot because that's the list you took. And if you don't Alpha Strike them, they're going to Alpha Strike you. But when you try and boost forward with all your Void Weavers, that means your Void Weavers are now in charge range of their characters. And so then the Solitaire and the Troop Master come out and they charge in and try and do as much counter damage. And usually you end up somewhat even at that point. One person getting the alpha, the other person getting a little bit more damage with melee. And then you have a game where just like a bunch of random stuff survives and you have to play with that.
You're both just rolling 4+ invulnerable saves at each other until one of you is dead.
That is horrifying. The horrifying part of this matchup is the invul saves.
Yeah.
This is one where it started out very poorly. I boosted forward, spent my 2 CP to Phantasm. I sent everyone forward. I shot up with the guns. I spent 2 more CP to fire and fade one of them back to try and be a little safer. I ended the turn with 1 CP after having Blade Stormed and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I killed, I think, 3 boats. So not enough. I think I killed... I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I was actually less than that. I killed 1 transport. And then I wounded a bunch of different boats, but didn't actually finish any of them off. One was at 1 wound, one was at 2 wounds, and that looks really bad.
Well, at least they're bracketed then, right?
Yeah, at least they're bracketed. For anyone listening, they don't bracket, they're only 6 wounds.
Yep.
The one nice thing was that because of this particular mission, and this matchup was really mission dependent, it was one of the missions where you're actually not too far away from each other in the deployment zones. And my Solitaire was deployed pretty much on the line, and he was able to blitz round 1, make it across the table, try and charge a unit of Void Weavers. Void Weavers light stratagem away, that's not going to happen. But they leave behind the Solitaire that they were protecting, so he was able to go in and kill the Solitaire after ignoring invul saves, because a Solitaire with a 3-up invul save, a god. A Solitaire with no save at all, dead. So, because there was no Solitaire to counterattack, his counterattack was a lot less lethal, which was really, really, really nice. Because then, of course, he counterattacks, he comes out with all of his boats, he shoots, I think, 4 or so of my boats off the table, so he's kind of at the attrition lead there. And then he sent out his Troop Master to clear off my guys off the center point. But that did put him in a place where then I was able to deliver my melee. So my 6-man troop squads come out, everyone charges, and the boats that do survive are all touched. Which means that only one of those squads can fall back and shoot with the fall back and shoot stratagem. The other ones have to just shoot the random dinky guys with swords trying to poke them in melee. And really made it.
Importantly, if you touch the Void Weavers, they can't shoot their blast profile melee, right? So they're shooting you with 2 attacks.
Yeah, exactly. And they're -1 to hit now, which troops normally don't get, but all of a sudden they join the -1 to hit club if they're in melee with heavy weapons. And like I said, there's no solution to that. Harlequins have no +1 to hit. They have no reroll to hit. They're just dealing with it. So all of a sudden they become a lot less efficient. We both took to the last, so I got one of his Void Weaver squads down to 1 Void Weaver left. He wanted to save the point, so that Void Weaver spends a CP to fall back and go into reserve. And so that's kind of a Void Weaver that's not shooting anymore. And then it became a really tough attritional game because he didn't have enough material that was not engaged and able to shoot. And he kind of ran out of material at that point to clear me off the middle points, which I was able to hold for 2 turns, and that gave me enough of an edge to win in the end.
Okay. Yeah, so would you say, I know it sounds like the mirror match is pretty even first versus second. Do you think that there is an advantage one way or another, or is that more mission dependent?
I do think it's mission dependent for sure. I think the second player is generally advantaged, and there are some really big watchouts to think about. Mostly that you make sure if you're the second player and they're coming at you, they're going to shoot you. You can't stop that. But make sure none of their major melee elements that are very, very fast can get the melee, and none of the fusion pistols, that they have fusion pistols, can fire. Because those are the short range damage boosts that really send the army from like a really great shooting army to lethal, unbelievable damage. Spoiler alert, that will come up in the finals. And so if you can stay out of range of all those melee units and keep every single transport, every single vehicle within 6 of your Shadow Seer, so fusion pistols go from range 6 to range 0 and thus can't fire, you will survive, and the second player can generally do better.
Yeah.
Where it gets mission dependent is when you're on like those missions where like you deploy in corners and you have to be 9 inches away from the center. And so your deployment zones are actually 18 inches away from each other. That's when you just put everything as far in the corner as you can, because it's just better to survive.
Yeah. Now, to that point, you're mentioning that the fusion pistols are pretty lethal because they do have the capacity to one-shot a transport, right? A D6 plus 2 damage. Despite the fact that it's highly unlikely you get that hit through, that means that the Harlequins player has to bank their luck dice to try to protect themselves against that hit. So, in your opinion, is there kind of a particular sequencing of attacks that you can use to mitigate the power of those luck dice? Kind of how when you're playing against an army with a lot of defensive stratagems, so like Adeptus Custodes, you try to target a bunch of different things early in the shooting phase and try to bait out those stratagems early so that then you can then target your bigger hits later on with more effectiveness. Is there a sequencing like that you can do to try to make them hold their luck dice until the end of the phase where they're going to be potentially less useful?
Oh, Trevor, you old so-and-so, you old dog. Yes, that is exactly correct. Shuriken cannons are high volume and thus not really great to reroll against because you only get so many rerolls. You want to reroll them against the big beefy shots. So you want to try and shoot as many of your shuriken cannons as you can possible first. That means your transports. If you have guys that don't have fusion pistols but have like regular ass shuriken pistols and plasma grenades, you want to use them. And then you can head over to your Void Weavers and do your Void Weaver shuriken cannons and then their prism cannons. And you really want to save those fusion pistols until last, in addition to the fact that you want to try and generate situations where they need to either save or use them. So like the Death Gesture in a transport flies out over to the corner, gets line of sight onto the Shadow Seer, because the Shadow Seer has to be on the ground, and shoots her. Shoot her first, because they need her to be alive, right? Any opportunity where she dies, they will spend rerolls. And so you can get 2 or 3 rerolls out of the way there, and then when it comes time to shoot your prism cannons and your fusion pistols, they don't have enough. And that's where you can start to randomly just get up your 4 fusion pistol shots. One happens to go through and does, you roll a 4, that's 6 damage, boom, boat gone. That's where you get these kind of subtle increases in efficiency that it's important to keep in mind.
Yeah. And that also probably feels to me like it leads into where Harlequins are more powerful going second than going first, right? Because going first, you jet out, you generate your luck, both of you generate your luck rerolls at the same time, right, at the start of the battle round. So going first, you jet out and you shoot a bunch of guns, but you have to hold those dice for those situations, right? But the player going second, if they have the opportunity to save the dice to use defensively, they can then use them offensively instead, right? So their swing back is going to be slightly more efficient.
Definitely. And for any aspiring Harlequin player out there, I'll tell you this right now. unless it would be the end of the world to not hit or wound with something, save all of your dice for defense. That's the most important.
Yeah, your defense is already good. Like, it's already so good that stacking, another 25% on top just makes that's what sends them to the level of unkillability, right?
Yeah, and like just from a dice math perspective, like especially in the mirror, your guns are as valuable as their guns, right? A dead Void Weaver versus an alive Void Weaver on your side is the same. I would say in terms of value. If you reroll anything before the save roll, you're betting. Like, let's say you wound on a 2, and you're trying to reroll that 2 up. That seems pretty valuable. They still get a 4 pinball save. Right, so you're saying you're going to pass a 2 up, and then they're going to fail a 4 up. But if you're rerolling your saves, you only have to pass a 4 up. So you will always be more efficient on the save than you will be on any other reroll. So
right.
It's going to give you the most value.
Yeah, generally speaking, you want to have your rerolls at as far down the chain, the attack sequence, right, as possible to get the most bang for your buck mathematically. Yeah. Like, if that's why you'll never see people reroll hit or wound, but you'll see people reroll damage all the time, right? Because
that one can do that.
Yeah, the further down you are on the chain, the more guaranteed the effect is, and the save is, it's all or nothing. So you might as well save them for that. But I imagine that efficiency that's not necessarily only relevant for the Harlequin mirror. A Harlequin player going second is also going to be better in a lot of other matchups for the exact same reason, right? Because then they can just save their, but potentially if they don't need to reroll in the shooting phase or in your opponent's shooting phase, they can save their luck dice to use on their own turn and then immediately generate them again for the same.
They get that added information. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting to think about. And I'm sure you did a lot of thinking about it because you played 2 more Harlequin mirror matches, but we're not going to talk about those right now because we're on to Custodes, one of the other boogeymen of the metagame. So we're up to the top 16 cut. Those first 4 rounds were day 1. And then I imagine it was a fitful night's sleep between day 1 and 2.
Yeah, definitely. I went back to my room and I canceled my plane and I just fell asleep. It's 4 games of 40k will take it out of you.
Absolutely, fair enough. And then it was on to Custodes. So how do you feel about the Custodes matchup in general?
Very positively. Custodes, just across the board, are an excellent melee army. They're excellent at board control. But we talked about like tech pieces. The Light Sadith is one that you're going to want for a variety of reasons. It's amazing. But the real tech of the why Light Sadith is so good is the Custodes matchup. Because those guys pay points to hit on 2s, and when firing at a Light Sadith model, if you are more than 12 inches away, you hit on 4s. And that's tough to come back from.
Yeah, and especially Emperor's Chosen, right, is like also predicated on basically having like master artisans across their entire army. And if you say no rerolls, they're like...
You can still reroll the wound roll, which is okay, but it loses efficiency either way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it basically changes that whole matchup where like the Custodes are this interesting matchup where they're mostly melee, but they have a couple of like really high efficiency shooting pieces that are designed to be anti-tank. Those anti-tank guns are just not going to cut it, right? Like 5 Virtus Praetors shooting 5 shots and hitting like 2.5 times on average and wounding 2 times on average, and then I pass 1 save and fail 1, and then I re-roll 1 save. I have a 50% chance to take a single damage roll, and that damage roll will not on average kill a Void Weaver. They can't run that gambit. So they're here to melee you for sure.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. In this particular matchup, my Custodes player, I think did the arithmetic in his head, and the best he could figure out was lining up as much as he could behind his terrain. And then he went first and he ran forward. He put, because his player place, put a terrain piece in the middle of the board, hit everything behind it. And I kind of scoot all my boats to get a little bit of line of sight. Not everyone can fire, but a couple folks can fire, and start picking off Virtus Praetors. And then it's go button. And the goal is to touch every triangle. And by triangle, I mean Harlequin. Because again, they're less efficient shooting in melee. Only one of them can fall back and shoot. They can't focus fire to eliminate whole squads. Whole bunch of problems. Now this is, I'm sure, a hot debate, but you can tessellate your boats because they're kind of triangle shaped. you can make like one triangle facing forward and the other downwards and then forward. So they get decently small, and then you can kind of condense them all together.
Yeah.
So all the void weavers
So
kind of
they
chill
fit
in the
together
middle.
because they're triangles, right? So they make a
Exactly, yeah.
this is
a
rectangle.
Yeah, this is the meme that I think a lot of people have seen online, where it's just like a giant stack of boats, because all the void weavers chill out together, and they avoid being touched by being surrounded by transports and land infantry, like dudes on the ground if you need them. And that's exactly what this was, right? So there's like a little gap between the like giant block of void weavers and then the guys just desperately trying to protect them. And it's okay if they're vulnerable because like you're going to take some hits, but the void weavers are really the key to this matchup, as they are in most matchups.
Yeah, like the key to the army.
Yeah, I mean, if you spend 1,000 points on something, that thing has to survive.
Yeah.
So they're kind of surrounded by boats, and then the transports have the added benefit of if they blow up the transport and create a charge path, guys fall out and re-block that charge path. And then that's kind of exactly what happened, right? He ran forward on his turn 2, shot a bunch of boats out of the way, and then the troops fell out kind of into the way. And then he shot them as best as he could. 4 of invul saves make it very challenging to reliably know which troops are going to die and how to disperse your shots. And so, like, one troop squad did pretty well on 4-ups, and that fully blocked out one void weaver squad. The other one kind of died off, and that's the way it goes. But because there was only one charge path, the light stratagem, again super relevant. He charges in, I spend 1 CV to light stratagem, and I take kind of the one boat that's not quite in the way, and it moves now into the way. And now it's impossible to touch everyone, and it becomes a real problem. At that point, like, the extension is so extreme because they've extended all of their Virtus Praetors, the shield captain, everyone that could reach has reached there, and now they're just out there. They didn't do the damage they needed to do, and you can swing back with your melee pieces and your shooting pieces. And at that point, you do too much damage for them to really make it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's interesting. That's I guess it is cool that there is, you know, sort of a counter to this this kind of melee aggression strategy that the Custodes player was implementing, and it was cool to hear that he was able to use of the player place terrain mechanics to his benefit as well to try to set himself up for the best position there. But obviously the anti melee is so strong that it's tough to enact that game plan reliably against Custodes for sure.
Yeah, it really is, and he did a great job, I have to say, like setting up the terrain and lining himself up to do this. But yeah, I think just in general, Virtus Praetors have a really hard time against Harlequins. So more just dudes are probably better into this matchup, especially because shuriken cannons are generally speaking AP1.
Right.
And so if you're a custodian in cover or you have a shield, I never know how to pronounce it, Presidium shield? Presidium shield? You have a shield, you have a 2-up save. And 2-up saves make everything inefficient, so you're not going to get a lot of damage into that.
Yeah. Do you think there's a universe where, I know we talked about how like having this glut of like 2 damage attacks so that the saves, like rerolling saves, isn't as effective. Is this the return of like the heavy bolter and autocannon profile? Like if you just jam Sagittarum on the table with Rendax and like said go, is there something there?
I think you'd want to like do some thinking about the math and how it lines up, but I think so. Especially now that Sagittarum, I think, get Misericordias for free.
They do.
So they're like pretty legit melee anyways.
Yeah.
And they can put out a lot of these damage 2 shots, which is right where you want.
Sagittarum unit probably kills a Void Weaver in melee. Like also.
Yes. Because they're strength 5, so they wound on 4 in melee just punching it.
Absolutely.
So I think, if they can like find a way to touch cover and then shoot, it's pretty challenging to remove them. And they're not too expensive. Like a 3-man squad's 150, right? That's pretty good. So that's where mine would go. Of course, they're still suffering from hitting on 4s as a result of the light they did, but the shooting back from a Void Weaver squad is also not good because they are, almost twice their points cost, and I doubt they kill more than 1.
Yeah, it's only 2 attacks into a 4+ invulnerable save, and there's no. Besides Luck of the Laughing God, which it's questionable whether you have offensively. There's no re-rolling, right, on the Void Weavers, right? They're just shooting at you. Their guns just.
Harlequins never learned how to re-roll something. Yeah. They have no knowledge of the kind.
Yeah. So I mean, that's like the perfect profile that everyone complains about shooting at Custodes with, right? Like, oh, I shot at them with all my las cannons, and they like transhumaned and made all their saves, and I didn't do anything, right? And that's exactly what's going to happen to those Void Weavers. It sounds like.
Yeah, and transhuman's really valuable too because you hurt the shuriken cannons, go to winning on 4s. The prism cannons go from winning on 2s to winning on 4s.
Yeah.
You have 2-up saves into all of the light guns. You have a 4-up invul save into the. I mean, a Void Weaver squad for 270 points puts out 6 prism cannon shots, right? No reroll, so 4 of them hit. If you transhuman, 2 of them wound, and then you're in the same place where you're passing one, failing one, and then like 1 gets through, so you kill 1 guy.
Yeah.
50 points of damage is not enough for a 270 point unit.
Right. Yeah, and I guess it's also interesting that like the only hitting on 4s does it only a lot of we talked about the custodians, they want to hit on 2s all the time.
Yeah.
But Sagittarium always hit on 3s anyway because they're always going to be advancing or double tapping.
True.
So
Yeah.
you're only netting an additional -1 to hit. Obviously, it's still painful. It's still very painful because you can do chicanery on the custodian side to ignore those penalties. But it's not quite as bad as another unit that doesn't generally impose itself like 3 consecutive -1s to hit.
Yeah. Exactly.
A normal unit hitting on a 2 gets hurt a lot more by the trans hitman effect than the Sagittarium unit.
Trans Elfman.
Yeah.
The last, if you really want to play the Uno reverse card as the Custodies player, you bring the Vixilla is the last piece, the Vixilla Magnifica.
The -1 to hit, the dense cover guy?
Yep, and that, of course, Harlequins don't have any rerolls to begin with, so they're also hitting you on 4s, no rerolls.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're playing a game again where, they have 4 invul saves, you have 4 invul saves, but you have 2 regular saves, and they have no regular save. And so you can try and play that game a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. Chad also pointing out that Noise Marines are pretty good at shooting down the boats.
I thought about that. That's a cool idea.
Yeah. Noise Marines, they were the secret technology when Drukhari were super powerful. It's a little bit tougher against the Harlequins boats, I think, because they're not quite as they don't have the same concentration of power. But the fact that especially against Star Weavers, you can drop down a bunch of Noise Marines, they can kill. They probably kill 2 Star Weavers on the gunshot, and then they double tap and just kill everyone who is inside them. So they really take away chunks of the Harlequins army in one go.
That could be really good. There's also, I think, a Chaos Dread Knight that just shoots mortal wounds. That's good too.
Oh yeah, the Soulburner petards.
Yeah, the petards. Yes,
petards. They gotta hit you though. That's the problem with those.
They do have to hit, which is the problem.
Yeah. Noise Marines paying 4 CP fairly often kills a unit of Void Weavers. Yeah, so that's for excruciating frequency plus it's the Noise Marine combo. So the excruciating frequency plus Veterans of the Long War plus endless cacophony to shoot again. Those things are Noise Marines are brutal. Anytime your opponent there's a metagame of lightly armored stuff that is multi-wound, Noise Marines their ears perk up a little bit. They're like, oh, what's that? We can dramatically overperform. Sick. This is the best day ever.
I think that's the thing. I mean, if you're a Chaos player, there's a lot to be sad about, but Noise Marines are definitely something to be happy about. That's a really strong piece, I think.
Yeah, was one of my favorite units in the game, Noise Marines. Anytime for a long time in late 8th and early 9th, I was playing around with a bunch of different Chaos builds because Noise Marines they're super fun to play with, and especially against stuff like Harlequins, and it was super brutal for Drukhari. If you have brought them in on the Remnant of the Maraviglia turn, so they have full rerolls to wound. They often will also just kill Star Weavers in the Harlequin player's shooting phase, which is pretty brutal for those guys. They don't get their 2 damage anymore or their bonus to hit, but they're still shooting a strength 4 shot with full rerolls or a couple strength 4 shots with full rerolls. And even if you engage them in melee, so a troop unit goes in, when you start killing them in melee, they just shoot bolt pistols at you. So you very often these light T3 infantry will just die if they go into a unit of Noise Marines as well. Which makes them really good against almost any kind of Eldari. Noise Marines are very good into.
Just dudes that just hit on 3s. They go to 4s, and then it's whatever, it's fine. Yeah. And they just have high volume. That's all you need.
And oftentimes they're prescience as well, so they go back to 3s and then reroll 1s because there's a guy nearby. And they're good. Yeah. Noise Marines good. All right, but we are talking about Necrons this time. We're not talking about Noise Marines. We're talking about something as almost as off the wall as Noise Marines. Because, we did get Austin Wingfield in the top 16 here, repping the Necrons. It is cool that as much as people like to complain about Necrons, they do find their way into podiuming events and stuff.
Weaseling their way in there.
They're squeaking their way in. They're just, they'll wake up one day from their aeons of slumber and be like, oh, what's that? I'm in the top 3 of a GT? Oh, okay. I didn't know there was a tournament here. Sorry.
I just lived here. I woke up and there was a tournament. So
yeah. So can you talk about this game?
Yeah. First off, Austin is amazing. What a Chad. Bringing Necron, doing really well. He's done this a couple of times, and he's just a good dude as well.
He seems super energetic on the stream when I watch him play, which is fun.
Yeah, he's great. Good energy. The cool thing about this list is 20 Necron warriors. Turns out they're still good. They're still pretty solid. A lot of their natural predators have kind of disappeared. Tower's still out there. We won't talk about that for now. But I'm a Space Marine player and I shoot 100 shots re-rolling. I'm gonna kill 20 warriors and you can't stop me. That kind of stuff is a little bit less relevant. And warriors are especially good because as soon as some of them die, they start resurrecting, and he's brought all the tech to help them. So he's got the Resurrection Orb, which everyone I think knows. So once 10 warriors die, or however many warriors die, you slam it down, they get another chance to resurrect. But also he has the Reanimator, which makes them res on 4-ups. So now they're re-rolling 1s, resing on 4-ups. So over half of Necrons that die are coming back, which is wild.
Yeah.
And then in addition to that, he's got the Technomancer, who can also res another D3 every round. So if you shoot the Necron warriors, those shots are gone. They're not doing anything. Unless you killed every single one of them, they've done nothing.
Yeah, plus he has a Resurrection Orb then as well. So even if you kill them down pretty low, a lot of times a lot of them are coming back anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'd say the key to this matchup is just don't shoot the Necron warriors. They're going to do what they're going to do. It's never worth it. I told myself this. I spent 2 rounds making great progress not attacking the Necron warriors. And then on the round 3, I tried to attack the Necron warriors and it went terribly. And I was only lucky that I had to wait that long before I did it because it's never going to work. Of course, there's also a Chronomancer to give them the 5 invul save, so they're going to survive. Excuse me. The real key here, of course, is that the big kind of Necron beefy guys that are toughness 5, 3 wounds, those guys don't have a lot of answer to getting shot by Void Weavers.
Yeah.
And so as long as you're patient, and this is exactly what this was, right? Just generally stay outside of charge range, don't expose so they can try and get into melee, and then just guard every objective. Place your player terrain so that ideally there's not ones that they can hide behind terrain on objectives, and then just kind of guard and wait for them. They kind of have to come out and play the game. Necron warriors can only take 1 or 2 objectives, and then the rest of them have to do stuff, and then you can kind of shoot the Silent King while they're doing it. And the ever-living bane of every Necron player is explosions, because they want to live in this tight cluster with all their characters giving their buffs. But for whatever reason, the Silent King explodes on 4s.
And they can't respawn from mortal wounds to you. They don't get a reanimation save.
Yeah. Oh, and the other tech piece, he's got the transport. I can't remember the name.
The Ghost Arc.
The Ghost Arc, which also reses more Necron warriors.
Mm-hmm. The Ghost Arc is it's sort of coasted by, but that unit is low key pretty good.
It's so tanky, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, because of that quantum shielding, right? It's transhuman all the time, and you can give it a 4+ invulnerable save.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it has 14 wounds.
Yeah. 14 wounds with living metal. So if through all those defensive stats you don't kill it, it starts regenerating.
Technomancer also can heal it for D3.
Yeah.
It's quite good.
Yeah. Sometimes you if you take it in Eternal Conquerors as well, then it itself is objective secured, and so you oftentimes have to kill it to take the objective away. And when you kill it, just 10 Necron warriors spill out, and they obfuscate it away again. Cool. I guess I won't attack it, and it will keep respawning guys.
It's still OPSEC, I think, in Neolok, or however you pronounce it in this one. Because Neolok, I think, is everything is OPSEC, and then also ignore AP1 in your deployment zone, which is a very specific rule, but is actually relevant. Because if you're going second,
I don't know if I've ever seen Nihilak actually.
Yeah, you wouldn't think it's good, but he didn't. I think knowing that Tau exists, and as long as you're not the closest model, all those AFP are neg 1 AP. all those AFP are A1 AP. Oh yeah, I said it properly.
Yeah.
And then of course shuriken cannons, AP1. So if you go second and someone flies forward and shoots 80 shuriken cannons at you, you get your regular saves. You stand in cover. Harlequins have no way to ignore cover, so you're taking 3 up saves. Then you're resurrecting, and all of a sudden you can kind of withstand the barrage. Really cool tech, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. I hadn't really considered that, but definitely, especially against Tau, for sure, gives you a ton of extra resilience. Because even like Farside Enclave's dropping a bunch of dudes with burst cannons on you, right? They're going to pick Monka, they're going to go to AP1, and then like you said, you drop them back down to AP0. And if they don't have target locks on those guys, which sometimes they don't take, then you're basically taking nothing from a Farside Enclave's burst cannon unit. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
Good job, dude. Yeah.
And of course, all those guns kind of really want to shoot Necron warriors, and it looks like that's the right profile.
Right.
But as long as like they have their 3-up saves, like those aren't going to do anything.
Right.
And then they're all going to stand back up, and then you can just sucker punch them back.
Yeah.
So really cool list. The trick is, staying really far away, not getting charged, and then tragically, I shot a bunch of shots into the Ghost Ark. The Ghost Ark died, did explode, and that did like 15 more wounds to his army.
Oh no!
And that's tough. I mean, that's just tough no matter which way you slice it.
Yeah. Necrons, they can control their explosions. They can auto explode. You'd think they'd be able to automatically not explode, but no.
Yeah. I mean, one man's opinion, I don't think explosion's a rule that needs to be in the game.
Yeah.
I'm okay without that.
Yeah.
Maybe when you play narrative play, it comes back. That's what it is.
Right. Yeah.
I
do like it when it can be guaranteed and you can use it offensively. But...
keep all the stratagems. Yeah, for sure. All your auto explode stratagems, they work.
Right.
But exploding on 6s,
and it's not like quite high profile enough to really like be a pain point too much, but when it like 1 in 25 games it comes up and it's like super disgusting because like you said, a Ghost Ark blows up on your opponent's whole army, but it's so unlikely that the Ghost Ark dies, it dies near their army and it explodes on a 6 that like it's almost like not worth complaining about, except when it happens when it's really important. You're like, why is this roll here? This is stupid. I don't disagree with you.
There's some transports too that explode like really big. Like I've played those Drakari armies where there's a bunch of vehicles, and you play that one game where 3 of them explode in a row, and then they kill each other. Or
those are fun when that happens.
Yeah, I have a lot of testing into Tau, and there's like a Tau build with lots of Devilfish that have breaches in them in the Monka, which I'm convinced is a direction that we could be heading. I think that'd be really good if we see some sort of nerf to the battlesuit body.
Yeah.
But those things explode for D6 damage for whatever reason.
And if you're in Tau Sept, they explode 9 inches.
Yeah. So really, the secret tech of that list is you're just shooting a bunch of nuclear missiles out of your opponent. Most of them are duds, but some of them are not.
It's like an unshielded nuclear reactor inside each of those Devilfish. You gotta hope that they can get out of your deployment zone quickly enough that when they go off, it's not on your guys.
The pregame move, essential.
Yes, very important specifically for that.
Anyway, but in this matchup, that's a lot of what it was. That explosion really hurt him. The Death Gesture, getting a chance to shoot his characters without him being able to do anything about it, is a real problem. That guy killed the Chronomancer, and like that happened.
Ooh, yeah, the Cryptex have like the perfect profile for that guy, right? They're like a 4+ save, 4 wounds.
Often no invul save.
Yeah, that's awkward.
Yeah. The one time I extended far enough to get an objective, and he was able to come out and melee them, right? The Ophidian Destroyers, they picked up the entire squad of Void Weavers in one go. Horrifying. But luckily that only happened once,
Wow. Yeah, but I think that does sound kind of like the story of Necrons right now, where it's like, when they can get their thing off and start doing stuff, they're actually pretty effective. But the problem is like they're like invulnerable save list across the entire faction. Besides the vehicles and the one thing that the Chronomancer points at, it's all just regular dudes with like a Space Marine armor. And as Space Marine players will tell you, that doesn't get you very far. So especially against a bunch of laser cannons on triangles running around.
There's a world where they really benefit from like the fact that everyone else is going to be teching people that only have a 4 invul save, and they're not trying to take much AP. But anytime you're trying to be like, my plan is to face not Harlequins, my plan is to face someone else, that's going to be a tough road to hoe.
The Devilfish pregame move is the Earthcast putting NOS in their transports. Like Vin Diesel's like right in the cockpit of one of those things.
Oh,
Yeah, that list is called Firecast and Furious, by the way. I think. All right. Well, speaking of fast things and potentially furious community members. Let's talk about number 2 of the 3 Harlequin mirror matches that we had. Because you played against John Lennon from Team Art of War in the semi-final round, and he was also playing Harlequins. He was playing the Harlequin list, so that's fun.
In my defense, I warned the stream guide that we were both playing the same list with the same paint scheme, so they knew. But I mean, I guess true to form, they wanted to put it on the table because it's an interesting matchup. I know people don't like mirror matches a lot of the time because I think it feels like, I guess, non-diverse by definition. But the Harlequin one especially, I really like because there's so much going on. This is another one of those, it's really dependent on the mission, one of the situations, because this is one where I had to go first, which is not exactly what you want. Like I mentioned, right, everything gets phantasmed right up to the line.
So this was on Data Scry Salvage, if I remember correctly, right?
Yep, that's right.
Which is, it's Vital Intelligence 2.0, unfortunately. And like we said, probably going first is pretty mission specific, but certainly for Data Scry, the player going first is monumentally advantaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's unfortunate that we got to the semifinals and then they decided to play that mission, but it is what it is.
Yeah, the going first, trying to control the board is kind of essential, especially in this one, because if anyone watched that particular game, they'll know. I send everything forward. I'll get a tribe. You try to do as much alpha damage as you can. I killed 2 transports and a single Void Weaver, so not a lot. Underwhelming first turn alpha damage. And then, of course, that puts me in range to get hit by all those melee characters. And then the Solitaire comes out, kills 3 Void Weavers on his own. The Troop Master comes out. I don't remember exactly. I think he killed 2. He killed a lot. And then, of course, he does all of his shooting and kills 2 or so more. And then all of a sudden, right, we're at the end of turn 1, and he's down, 3 votes and 1 is injured, and I'm down maybe half of my total votes. That looks really bad. Luckily, right, past a couple 4 pinball saves, some of those boats stay alive, so you get to use them. But the critical thing is that when I went out turn 1 and pushed everything forward, a couple of boats go off into the corner. They control the corner objectives, and that really makes the tone of this game just die slow enough and hold John in his deployment zone as much as can be done in order to score primary. And that's kind of the story of this one.
Yeah, and this one was streamed on War Games Live, right?
Yeah, War Games Live. Yep.
I remember. I guess we could actually literally pull up the stream, so that's exciting. We could. I remember watching that game and this John being down so far on primary and. Remembering, I think that he only scored primary on bottom round 5, right?
I think so. Maybe he scored a 4 at some point. I really definitely not in the first couple turns.
Right. And I remember it looking attritionally not very good for you, but the primary objective score certainly told a much different story. Yeah, we can pull the stream up here. So we can actually just look at the score sheet towards the end of that game.
Yeah, and the map could be helpful too.
Yeah.
The one thing that there's kind of 2 things there. One is that I took to the last, and he took the kind of Harlequin Special Secondary. I think Deadly Performance. So that kind of motivated us a little bit differently. I made this particular choice because, in my experience, if you're going second and you have to the last, you're in really good shape. I did forget, War Games Live, they do a great job. But they have these table side cameras that just catch the most unflattering angle of me.
Yeah, the up angle is never what you want to get for photogenicity, for sure. Yeah. I can't imagine anyone's super excited to get to, to get caught on
He gets
those.
great shots of the models though. Like he's got these cool gadgets and stuff that I think he's
Oh,
made
for
himself.
sure. Yeah, right on stream here we have the camera moving around and getting like cinematic pan shots of the game. And with these, there's those marbled ruins that we talked about before.
Yeah, it looks good,
How
man.
cool
It
they
looks
are.
good.
Yeah, man. The terrain looks great. War Games Live, like big shout out to them. I do a shout out to Joe and over there as often as I can. But oh my God, is that stream set up the best in the business for sure?
He did such a great job. Oh my god.
Yeah.
But that aside, I think you can see here. Obviously, again, we have the same paint scheme, so it's kind of hard to tell. And yeah, you can see he's moving camera gadgets. This is towards the end of the game when I have, I think, one transport alive. Every other one I think you see there, besides the individual transport that's being surrounded by a bunch of other transports, is his. Yeah, you can see there's. I have a couple. Yeah, I have one right in the middle there, surrounded by 4 of his other transports. And I have 2 others kind of on the top right corner that are all on low wounds. One of them's kind of standing on that objective on 2 wounds. The other one's in the corner on 3. And I think if you see the score sheet, he ended up scoring 1 round of 4 primary, and then the 12 at the end, and that was it.
Yeah.
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 So really a story of like all my stuff coming to the bottom right corner. That forces, of course, his melee response to be in that corner, and then just flinging stuff out, boats and whatever it have to be, in order to constantly deny primary, and praying to the 4-up gods, to Chegarak, to make the 4-ups. Couple really lucky strings of dice that like kept a couple key boats alive, lets you kind of stay in it. And then from there, we reach the end, and there's just not enough time. We actually ran right up into the actual time. I think we were able to get all the way to the end of the game, so there's no issue there. But no time in terms of like actual number of battle rounds for him to get out there and then kind of return and take the points back.
Right. Yeah. So do you think that he potentially played too cagey, or was it just a the effect of the mission being so difficult to score that he had trouble, taking you off quickly enough?
It is not my place to criticize the John Lennon.
You did win the game, to be fair.
I will definitely say the mission is a really big difference.
Yeah.
This mission is very challenging to come back from when you're going second. Obviously, the path he went down didn't work out, so the spreading out more probably was a little bit better choice. Because I took to the last, he focused a lot of time and energy killing every single to the last, and he succeeded there. I think, thinking about it, I probably would say, like, get out of your transports earlier, send OPSEC out earlier. There's almost nothing you can do to stop me from preventing his primary. Mm-hmm. There are things you can do to stop me from scoring my own primary, which I think is where he probably wanted to be.
Yeah.
That's where, like, that subtle difference in the fact that, like all these other lists, I had 6 troop squads and fewer transports, and he had fewer troop squads and more transports, meant he just had a couple fewer resources to be able to capture points, like a little fewer trash pieces. But pretty relevant when it comes to scoring primary in missions that are domination, so take 2, take 3, and in missions where you're going second. So it's a pretty niche scenario, but I made a difference here.
Yeah, for sure. But, even that said, I think kudos to John for bringing it back to an 8-point differential, even after going second in what I think is a very first player oriented mission. Yeah. But that puts you on to the finals for the third of your Harlequin mirror matches. But you had 2 Harlequin mirrors under your belt already. So I imagine you were feeling pretty good. You're like, another Harlequin player? Look at this Joker. You push your glasses up a little bit.
There's some light reflects off of that. Somewhere
you start speaking in Japanese, while looking, sort of your eyes directly on the ground. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the Harlequin mirror is, like I said, it's fun because you bash at each other, and then you have what was left over after that initial alpha, and then it's just trying to figure out ways to scramble for primary back and forth, and all sorts of jank that you can use to make that happen. This is an interesting one. I gave a couple of spoilers, but this is a story of attrition and getting a chance to use those characters and those extra damage pieces. This is one where I go second. It's also one where we deploy fairly close to each other. But when player placing the terrain, there was this one really big, chonky piece that I was able to land like right in the back of my deployment zone. I can put my Shadow Seer right up against that, so it's very challenging for a Death Gesture or someone to come around and get line of sight. And then she lives just shoved right up against that piece with just Void Weavers encasing her. Just giving her loving hugs.
Please don't touch me. Nobody touch me.
Exactly. Just so that no one can get to her. No one can solitaire blitz and jump over and land in combat with her. The space just isn't there. And then all of that has to be far enough away that a solitaire can't do it on turn one. And that's kind of exactly what happens, right? On turn one, Matt blitzes. The solitaire rolls, I think, a 6, so he's going 18 inches. He jumps out, and then the charge is going to be something like a 9 or something, or maybe a 10. Just a bit of a risk. And of course, the light strategy would make it very challenging. So the solitaire couldn't quite make it all the way the distance. And then that means when the Void Weavers come all the way around and they shoot their shots and they kill four of my boats, then I can go and retaliate, and the damage is too lethal. Because when those boats extend super far forward in order to get their shots, if you're not careful, they extend past the range of the Shadow Seer, who can't help them anymore. Mm-hmm. That means the fusion pistols can now fire. And those 5 fusion pistols they scoot off onto the right side, they kill, I think, 1 or 2 boats on their own. And then, of course, he's in range to get hit with my solitaire. My solitaire blitzes, picks up 3 boats on his own, and then all of a sudden, right, those 2 additional damage sources have killed more boats than he killed on turn 1. And the rest of my damage can go into adding on more, and I'm able to pick up all 9 Void Weavers in 1 turn, and that's really tough to come back from.
Yeah. So now was that bottom 1 or was that bottom 2?
Bottom 1.
Bottom 1, yeah. So it was literally, you just had to assume this super defensive position, and he just overextended. Would you say?
Yeah. The other thing that I was surprised about is that he was really focused on doing alpha damage, so he spent rerolls offensively to get additional wounds and such. Mm-hmm. And that helped him kill, the average is often like 3 boats. He got to 4 boats, so maybe that's why that happened. But that means when I struck back, right, he didn't have those rerolls, so he couldn't spend them on the fusion pistols. He couldn't spend them on the prism cannon rolls. Right. And that exposed him to take a little more damage than I think maybe otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, the dynamic that we were talking about before, where you get that additional knowledge, being able to hold on to your dice if you need to, and then the player going second can manipulate their luck dice a little bit better than the player going first.
Yeah. Definitely grateful that I got a chance to go second in this one. I think that's the advantage position. Mm-hmm. So I won't lie about that for sure. The key really being getting a chance to strike someone once they've extended that far, and then just making sure your critical pieces aren't hit with a solitaire, aren't touched. Shadow Sphere specifically, the Void Weaver specifically, and then same as before, I deployed so that those guys are behind that chunky piece of terrain. But the transports, instead of hiding as best they can, there's just no point. They stand totally visible. If you want to get a shot on them, you can. Good for it. You got it.
Please come forward. Please.
Exactly.
Come
yeah,
shoot
they
me.
kind of like they welcome you in, they bait you, and importantly, they take up the space, right? So the channels that someone could go through to touch the Void Weavers, those are taken up by transports. And so you'll see, again, if you look at the stream, this kind of situation where you have a couple of ruins and there's like some alleyways that go between the ruins, and in every alleyway is a transport going, "Hey, welcome! Like let's chit chat, sit here." So that really helped. And once you lose 9 Void Weavers, then it's challenging, really, really challenging. Yeah. And Matt actually also did a really, really good job from that point, right? Same as the other ones. You do turn 1, you smash each other, a bunch of damage, and then you try and kind of wang jangle your way into primary from there with the what's remnants of left of your army.
The old wang jangle.
The old wang jangle, and yes. And he really did a good job clawing back from, I think, being down that much material. But ultimately a little too much damaging, and I was able to barely hold it back from crawling back from it. So another squeaker.
Fair enough, and that puts you undefeated. So 8-0 and the winner of the Adepticon Championship. So congratulations for taking it down. That's a pretty big deal.
Thrilled, yeah. Normally I play a lot online, so this is one of my few experiences traveling out to an event. So really, really jazzed. I think I might do it again.
Ooh, very exciting. Yeah, I mean, it's cool to see, especially folks from the online community and from, our Discord community going out and having the success. We had True on a couple weeks ago, who came, I think, top 5 LVO. Matt Laura was number 2 LVO, and then obviously you number 1 Adepticon. All people who play pretty often in the TacticalTortoise server. So pretty psyched to see that the practice is paying off, which is awesome.
I'm proud of the TacticalTortoise server. Highly recommend. Although I guess if you're watching, maybe you play anyway.
Yeah, hopefully. Who knows? Now, do you think, specifically in these mirror matches, and it sounds like, as much as we want to complain about, mirror matches being what they are, or being so highly represented, I guess, do you think that there is a more defensive tack that you can play if you're in the first seat, in order to sort of extend the game a little bit so that you're not running into these beta strikes? Or is that just like, are you just giving up too much table space to be able to do that?
There's definitely a line you can play where you say, hey, I'm not going to come close enough to shoot my shuriken cannons. There's 24-inch range down to 18-inch range with Mirror Architect. I'm only going to take my long-range beam cannons so that if you want to, come alpha me, you can, but that puts me in the kind of the second spot position. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is because people have, hot 5 rerolls, and you have not that many shots, 18 total from your whole army at that point. You're pretty much going to do 0. You could maybe kill 1 boat, but almost nothing is going to get done. And that puts you in a position where then they're going to have second turn scoring, in addition to the kind of level of damage. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's also a line where you can say, I'm going to take to the last and also then go first. And that'll give me the ability to kind of interact and negate some of that.
So it's really... It sounds like, Harlequins are so strong at primary objective scoring because, they're super fast. They have all these little obsec dudes who, like we said, are pretty hard to kill, who are just going to run around the table and grab objectives when they need to. It sounds like the pressure is on to get your points early because you're not guaranteed to get them later on in the game, whereas the second player is going to have that bottom round 5 scoring that's really going to benefit them. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think you're right. And then you pile that on with the fact that, like, if you're positioning correctly, you can put your alpha damage out there. You're going to get beta struck back, but if all of your damage characters are then kind of hiding a little bit behind the line and ready to return fire, then you can launch your characters in there and do some damage to them, and that gives you some additional play. Again, usually you'll be down attritionally, but your goal at that point is to do enough damage that it gets close enough to canceling out that the fact that you're now across the board and you're holding all these objectives is still going to give you a primary edge.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that makes total sense. If only every matchup in 40k was as intricate as the Harlequin mirror. It sounds like, because those matchups where you have to sort of formulate a game plan or sort of formulate a play essentially that you're going to follow throughout the game and execute that to the best of your ability. Those are my favorite, and so
yeah.
So it sounds like it's actually pretty fun to play, like you said.
I have a great time. I love the Harlequin mirror.
Yeah.
I think it's a blast every time.
Yeah. Plus you get to see these super cool, knockout punches, right? With these characters coming back, swinging back and forth in these big shooting phases.
Eurohammer. Indeed.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on a little bit from there, I think it's probably worth a discussion talking about Harlequins themselves, because I know it's a big talking point in the 40k community right now about, especially, we'll keep calling it the Harlequin list, the triple Void Weaver, 4 to 5 Star Weaver build. Is rocking an astronomical win rate right now, and shows very little sign of slowing down. So I'd like to ask someone who might have a little bit of a bias, what your thoughts are on the power of the Harlequins as a faction, and if anything needs to be done or can be done to bring them back in line with the other factions in the game?
Yes, that's a good question. I definitely don't want to be the person going out there and saying Harlequins are balanced, because I think it's very clear that a lot of the 2022 books have a bit of a mismatch with the 2021 books. And Harlequins, of course, are very, very good. I would try and pump the brakes a little bit on the panic. Especially, like, I think you go look at the stats online. I'm actually a market researcher by trade, so whenever I see kind of stats, I want to take a closer look. A lot of people look at the win rate and they see, okay, what's the win rate of folks without the mirror, playing light, without Skyweavers, right? So this list style, and that list has a crazy win rate, and that's certainly true. You are, of course, looking at specifically only me, Eric, and John. And Matt, right? I think we're the four players doing that. So the data set's a little small, and of course those are, I would argue, like Matt, John, and Eric are all excellent players. So it's a little bit challenging to put them out there. That said, it's definitely feels bad when the Harlequins play against something like, I'll say, Orcs in that round too. Like, that's really tough. There are for sure things you can do to pull them back in line. I have some thoughts. I think that I wouldn't go and try and make Void Weavers only one per like take. They can't be in squads anymore, just because the Harlequins only have like a couple of data sheets, and if you start cutting it down so the Void Weavers can't really exist out there in large quantity, then they're just like literally something else in the book that can do damage to things that are like -1 damage. Like, it's fusion pistols and the Void Weaver, and that's pretty much it. Everything else is 1 or 2 damage. The solution, I really think, is points changes. It's pretty clear that the Void Weaver is undercosted, right? It's extremely efficient for its defensiveness. I would say all vehicle profiles, so the Star Weaver, the Transport, and the Void Weaver, hit him for some more points. Let's say 5 to start off with. And then specifically the Void Weaver's cannon, the Prism cannon, that's so effective. That one you can jack up a little bit more, maybe 15. So the Void Weaver is going now up 20 points. The Void Weaver is now 110. That feels a little bit more reasonable. And that'll, I think, give you a chance to see how that affects things. That's my list that would pull off like 150 or 60 points, which should be a substantial take. That said, I do have a hot take on the flip side of this, though. If you want to change things a little bit more, I would say you also want to motivate people to do a little bit more melee. The Harlequin book right now, after its redesign, does not really have the ability to host melee units that can mix it up with other melee units. Like, even if you kit out a full squad to have all melee, like, punchy weapons, they're just like strength 4 guys with no access to rerolls in the universe. And that's just not going to do it. So a Harlequin list will always be a shooty list. It has to be. My recommendation is actually make Harlequin melee weapons strength 5. Now, I think you have to increase their points to accommodate for that. But that gives Harlequins another play style. And then you can also think about doing more things to the Void Weaver, making them maybe 1 per unit, whatever it is, so that you have a more internal balance in the book. That's my thoughts.
So, yeah, I know you mentioned that a restriction to Void Weavers would be really sort of deleterious to Harlequins as a faction, but I do wonder what your thoughts are on whether or not, and this might not be, this might be a question of whether or not the designers are viewing Harlequins as a faction. Whether or not they should, I don't know, but they are included inside the Craft Worlds book, and a lot of the mechanics are pointing towards the intention that they're taken as a supporting sub-faction to other Eldari factions. So, for example, you can take traveling players in Craft Worlds list and in Drukhari list without breaking their faction abilities. Do you think that there could be a push to make Harlequins less reliable as their own army, and kind of try to pigeonhole them into playing as support for another Eldar army?
Yeah, that's certainly another design tack. I wouldn't hate that. Bit of a tangent, but like by the same token, like knights as their own book are very challenging to balance because, right, like there's not that many data sheets and they're all by nature kind of skew lists.
Right.
Just like Harlequins are always going to be by nature a skew list in one direction, probably towards being hard to hit and fast, and generally speaking, going to try and be defensive against shooting because they aren't going to have a lot of wounds. That's I think a decent design tack. I would be surprised if we can convince GW to do that.
Yeah. Well, I almost wonder if that was their intention from the get-go, and
Yeah, it
that
might
could
be.
inform a decision to restrict, units like Void Weavers.
Yeah.
It's it was kind of out of the blue when it happened to orcs, right? But now that there's precedent for it, I don't know if the community might not want it, but I don't know if it's off the table for the design team.
Yeah, no, I and whatever you have to do to make the game feel good and fun and balanced and fair, like I think that's the right thing to do for sure. The other way you could do it is to try and expand the total number of data sheets in Harlequin. So like maybe the Void Weaver with the Prism Cannon is a data sheet, and the Void Weaver with the Haywire Cannon is a different data sheet. So like the overall number you can take is more.
Sure.
And you have some variety there.
Yeah, it's
and
kind of
maybe-
like how orc buggies are. They're basically all the same profile, but there's like 4 different ones. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, I
and-
could definitely see that for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that change to the orcs was still. I mean, it affected them pretty significantly, but it's a little less brutal if you can take a this wagon, and you can take a snaz wagon, and you can take it. So you have a lot of variety you can do there. Expanding just the total number of data sheets is probably a good way to do that without just kind of blowing it up, so that you can only take 3 strength more than 5 or more than 6 guns in the book.
Yeah, it is kind of an awkward situation, because of that, the fact that there's not a lot going on in that in that supplement. So it's hard to fine tune because any of your changes to any one data sheet has a sort of disproportionately impactful effect on the on the faction as a whole, essentially.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, a balancing point. The other thing I might recommend is take Void Weavers down to 1 per unit, and that's fine. That's the way it is. And then re-expand so that troops can have more than 2 fusion pistols. And then you could say, hey, you have this other option. You can take fusion pistols. That opens up the possibility for you to run more similar like Harlequins used to run, which is squads of 5 guys with fusion pistols, which personally, as a design aesthetic, I love. You can ask anyone to talk to me. My opinion is that all the guns in the game should be much shorter range so that there's more dynamic play. So I think that a really powerful, high damage 6-inch range gun is super interesting.
Yeah.
Because I'll agree with you,
I agree with
just
that.
having guys that are super, super killy that are 36-inch range that kill you from across the board, that's not as good in terms of fun on the battlefield, nor is it as easy to balance.
For sure. I had another point that I was going to bring up, and then I forgot what it was. So, nailing it. Super professional over here. I'm sure I'll remember it sometime tomorrow. So here's a question that I'm sure the people on this channel are probably would like to know the answer to, even more than almost anything else we talked about. But the new Tyranid Codex has the capacity to do 35 mortal wounds in a psychic phase. Have you taken a look at any of the new Tyranid mechanics at all? And if so, what are your thoughts on that matchup?
I've seen some of it. I am concerned.
Andreas Hoffman and I are literally on the same wavelength in chat over here.
Yeah, he knows.
We are both asking questions at the same time.
I think that is going to, as seemingly has been the case throughout the release cycle of 9th edition, a book comes out, it's very strong, and then kind of their natural predator seems to always come out right after them. Mortal wounds are the answer, for sure. Doing 15 mortal wounds is great. If you do 18, you kill 3 Void Weavers, so you're there. Tyranids look very strong. As a Harlequin player, I am concerned. As a 40k player, I'm excited for Tyranids to come out and be cool. I think that they deserve it. I think the like double movement, sending guys like 90 inches down the field or whatever, and ignoring line of sight and blowing people up outside of line of sight, that is less good. But the new design they're going with looks really fun. And another tangent. You ready for a Zach tangent?
Oh, I'm psyched. I'm so ready.
I think GW is doing a great job. And this is I can't believe this is a hot take.
This is spicy right here. Oh man.
I remember like when I like played in high school, not that seriously, there was a paragraph, like first page in the rule book that said like this is not a competitive game. It's not supposed to be balanced. If you're a competitive player, go away. It's not for you. And then I played War Machine.
Yeah, it's like page -5.
Exactly, yeah. And then you compare that to where we are today, or even to something like 7th edition, which admittedly I didn't play, but I've seen a lot of the media from. And we're doing so much better. And you think about the hundreds of thousands of dollars they're spending in thinking about how to design these rules. Like, we're getting responses from them so much faster than we used to be. Quarterly responses are really good. And like you go to an event like Adepticon, and they have like 6 professional streaming people there, making sure that the events are cast and they're looking really good and high quality. I just want to say I think that's excellent. Like, their intentions are in the right place, and we as a community can send good vibes their way and tell them that we really appreciate that, because I think that makes a big difference. Because they're really kind of going out on a limb to invest in the competitive scene, and I love that they're trying really hard. That said, they have made a game that has 13 or 15 factions, depending on how you split it, that are all like different in the way they identify, and that's really, really challenging to balance.
For sure.
So, I think that your idea that maybe things like Harlequins and things like Knights maybe don't have to be their own book might make that job a little easier.
We're just trying to help you out, GW.
Exactly. But I totally lost the thread of what your original question is. I apologize. That tangent really got me.
We were talking about Tyranids.
Yes, but the Tyranid book looks really fun. I do agree it will probably be very strong. And we'll see kind of how things adapt and how the meta adapts to it. But I think that they are likely to be real kings when they come out, for sure. And they will do very well into this list.
Yeah. I do wonder, if there is an intention for subsequent releases to fight well against the previous releases, because it's been kind of hit or miss. And I think the meta has tended to just find the best answers in new releases.
Yeah, that's true.
A little bit more than more than I imagine the books were designed specifically that way. Especially since I think the order of some of the releases has been switched because of supply chain issues. So I don't
Definitely.
I don't know if that I would put my tinfoil hat on and say that was intentional.
That was the plan. It's all to sell more minis.
Right.
No.
Like, what does Gene Sailor call counter, right? Like,
Yeah, and it's very challenging to design a codex. I think you're giving people probably too much credit to assume that like they're intentionally building the counters before they've even seen what the competitive scene.
Right.
Because these books have to be done months and months ago in order to come through print. So I would doubt that they're that. I don't think it's intentional.
Yeah, I think what it feels like to me is happening is that the new book is, tends to be powerful, and in being powerful, it also has a bunch of really strong tools in it, and one of those tools can be used to beat the book that's previous to it. It didn't feel like to me that like Adeptus Mechanicus, which came out after Drukhari, like was specifically designed to beat Drukhari. They just had tended to have a pretty even matchup because both of the books were really strong. And then like Grey Knights came out, and Grey Knights like absolutely trashed Drukhari, and I think that was just like a profile matchup thing. They just had really good profiles against Drukhari profiles, and that made them win a lot. I don't know if I would point to that as some sort of intelligent design,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting time because we're headed towards a balanced data slate in April sometime, and allegedly, and we could see some transformative changes. Hopefully we see Tau get maybe a little ding. maybe we see some of the other top factions, sort of brought down a little bit, and then maybe some of the bottom factions brought up, and then obviously new Tyranid Codex release that I think is going to be potentially transformative, and the metagame in 3 weeks time might look totally different than the one that that Adepticon played in.
Yeah, and the other kind of system that exists is that like when a book comes out and we find what's most powerful in it, then traditionally they get fixed, right? They take a little bit of ding, they go down in power, and that often coincides with when the next book is coming out. So it always kind of looks like the next one is always the best because it hasn't been stress tested by 20,000 people trying to find the best thing yet.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. New Guiding Night, what you've heard is that they brainstorm batches of books so that it looks like. So that rules come in waves, like the turn off rerolls era we are seeing right now. Yeah, I will say that as someone who's designed rules in the past, oftentimes what will happen is that a designer or a design team will come up with a mechanic or like an interesting interaction, and then they'll get excited about that and then put it into a bunch of different things. And I don't think that I am alone in that. I think that happens to almost every game, and whether that's sort of an intentional mechanic. So something like Magic the Gathering, right? We'll come up with a new mechanic and then string it out throughout an entire set or something. You generally, I think a game designer will just come up with a mechanic that they really like the gameplay of, and then releases in that era or within that same cycle will over-represent that mechanic. And I think that that's very much the case for 40k as well. Let's hope that like some of the mechanics that they've been implementing more recently start to bleed into other releases. So for example, like we saw Tyranid Indirect Fire requires spotters now, right? Which is like really cool, and I hope that other stuff does that.
Yeah, that's the dream.
Yeah. Just unnerf all the old codexes. Yeah, for sure. Let's put orcs back to where they were. Justice for orcs.
Justice for orcs. I agree.
So we do have some questions from chat here. Alex E asking, what faction do you fear to play most when playing Harlequins?
Craft Worlds.
So basically a mirror match is what you're saying.
I actually think the Craft Worlds book is very different than the Harlequins book.
Yeah, it has a lot more artillery, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's the artillery that I'm afraid of, because I hate artillery on a personal level. But also the number of mortals they can throw out. Like all the Exarchs can kind of splash mortals. Eldritch Storm specifically is like
oh yeah.
Oh man, like we hate that like a giant brick of Void Weavers are all in the same place and then they shoot you. Like, well, a thing that deals more wounds to things that are in the same place, like that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Like Eldritch Storm specifically, and then all of the smites, like Crushing Orb, the variety of other things that they can do to do mortals is pretty good. And then they have the other thing that counters Harlequins, which is just guys that hit on threes and have high volume. So like Scatterbikes and other shuriken cannons and things like that. So a lot of really good answers there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially since like they have a bunch of units that just shoot 40 times, right?
Yeah.
And
I'll do it.
Yeah, and even like I can imagine something like Swooping Hawks being kind of a nightmare, because you're like, hey, we can reduce ranges and we can make you try to engage at long range or whatever, and the Swooping Hawks just did like advance 20 inches directly to you and then shoot you and run away.
Yeah, just knock you with Doom, so they're rerolling all their wounds, and they shoot like 40 shots, and then that'll kill stuff for sure.
Yeah, and if they can get inside the reroll distance, right? Because is it distance based for the weavers to turn off your rerolls? Is that correct?
No, that's just on their data sheet.
Okay.
The distance
it's just all the time.
Is the hit transhuman to hit,
Gotcha.
whatever you call it.
Okay, yeah. So they can't guide their way into auto wounding a bunch of times, unfortunately. But
No, yeah.
yeah, at least they can shoot you and then not be worried about being attacked back, because they'll just be on the other side of the table immediately.
Or if you're inside that range with like fast moving Scatterbikes and your ult way, you can get +1 to hit, go back to hitting on threes. There are solutions there. Lots of solutions there.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And you mentioned Thousand Suns as well, right? As potentially being
Yeah.
a bit obnoxious for the Harlequins.
Yeah, like the OG Thousand Suns list that has a couple characters that throw out 20 mortal wounds a turn. They that'll kill a vehicle squad a turn. And I think a lot of their weaknesses were that their characters were vulnerable to fast moving stuff, and certainly the Solitaire and the Street Master can cause some real problems. But Harlequins is not Drakari, and they don't have a million high damage melee attacks. They're doing their stuff at range, and that they can do okay with, right? They have a -1 damage stratagem. Once you go down to damage 1, then all of a sudden they get +1 save, so they're ignoring your AP 1, and their guys in cover are taking 2-up saves into shuriken cannons. That could be trouble.
Yeah, definitely understandable. The problem with craft rolls is that it's not a great matchup against Custodes. I could see that, John. It doesn't. I don't know if I've. I think craft rolls seems like I've been able to play out of it, but I could definitely see that being problematic, especially Emperor's Auspice, because they want so many rerolls.
Yeah, the rerolls are the lifeblood of that army.
Yeah. I think we did touch on this a little bit, but Chad is asking for your thoughts on the viability of the new Tyranid Codex.
Viable, I would say. Strongly viable.
Yeah.
It looks really good. If you're a Tyranid player, be excited. I think that's what I would say.
Yeah. I was a little sour on it when it first got spoiled, to be honest, like way more so than I should have been. And that was mostly because the first test games I played with it so wrong. And I think that points to the fact that it's not as much of a point-and-click adventure game as the current Tyranid Codex is.
Yeah.
Like it's predicated on all those really convoluted combos, and that is like my jam.
That's fun.
Like,
it's just better design, I think, than
Yeah.
like I shoot you and you die. Like there's a lot of fun stuff going on there with like getting your synapses right, and just the dudes like warriors. Tyranid warriors look cool, man.
Yeah, I did lose 15 of them in a shooting phase yesterday, so I'm a little bit sour on Tyranid warriors.
Yeah, they're
I'm
not
gonna
that
start
tanky.
throwing my Tyranid warrior models in the garbage. So. Brian Aragon asking, other than Void Weavers, should anything else in the Harlequins faction be toned down?
The transport body is also good. I mean, it's also very cheap. It has the same shuriken cannons, right? For the same reasons, it's very good. That's why I'd recommend like a lesser point hike, but a point hike there is, I think, appropriate. The actual troops themselves, they're fine. And even the characters, I think, are okay, right? It's a little ridiculous that the Troop Master can like charge 1,000,000 inches, but he's not the killiest thing in the universe, right? Drazar exists, so.
Yeah, no character will ever compare to Drazar ever again.
Yeah.
He will be the yardstick by which melee characters are measured.
Exactly. He's no whip succubus from Drakari.
Yeah.
He's no like there's a similar like crazy melee build from Orcs. Like there are lots of really powerful characters in there.
Yeah, you definitely paid for the maneuverability for sure.
Yeah, that's those are all the data sheets.
Yeah,
So.
I remembered what the point I had forgotten about earlier. Is when we were talking about Void Weavers and the potential to increase the points cost on Void Weavers or change how many can be taken in an army. I know that mechanical changes are not usually GW's.
That's true.
GW's shtick. They usually want to change something that's not tied to the datasheet. But do you think there's a universe where something happens to Luck of the Laughing God, where it changes to only affect core units or only affect infantry or not be able to be used on saving throws? Do you think there's something like that happens just to make your attacks more consistent on those high and vulnerable saves?
Yeah, I think that there's two questions there, right? Is it likely to happen? I think there's a decent chance that they will like FAQ it in a way that clearly changes the way the rule works, such that you can only use it like once per phase or something, once per attack sequence or something. That's definitely possible. Should they do that? I personally don't think so. Again, I'm clearly very biased, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think that like it's a fun mechanic and it gives you tactical flexibility and lets you choose where you want to invest in defense or offense, and that's super cool. The more you restrict that, the less interesting it becomes. So I think if you really wanted to change it, I would say you'd have to like kind of fundamentally change it and say like it shouldn't be rerolls anymore. It should be some other thing. Maybe just like a flat +1 or something, or something like that. Obviously, that level of change GW is just not going to do after the books come out.
Right.
So I don't think that's realistic. It would just, I think, be a bummer if it was just like, hey, like once per phase you can reroll a single die. It doesn't do a ton. It like sometimes if you're like right on the verge of surviving, it can give you a shot. But that's just not like, it's not that interesting when you're thinking about the tactics of the game. So I'd want to do something else. Maybe maybe you just lower the number and you go like, instead of having 3 base, you just bet, right? You bet how many you want, so you get like maybe 2, maybe 3, or maybe you take away the betting mechanic and you just get 3. That's another option, because having 5, which is usually what I end up having, because I usually bet 2,
Right.
Gives you enough that you can be like, that thing survives.
Yeah.
And that gets a little bit of a problem. It's exactly the same thing Custodies have, right? Custodies have the ability to spend 2 stratagems in any individual unit and just make it survive, right? It can be no rerolls and it can be transhuman, and that thing, like, unless you're just pummeling it, is going to live.
Yeah, I think there is like a fundamental difference there where Custodies use a finite resource for that, whereas the luck dice come back every battle round, right? It would be similar if Custodies got 3 CP every turn.
Yeah, and that's fair. Like maybe that's actually the technique. Like if you think about fundamentally changing it, say like, hey, like it's a different pool, a lot like CP that grows over the game that you have to spend. That would be even more interesting because you'd have to decide when in the game you want to spend it. That'd be cool.
Maybe you have like a starting pool and then you bet on top of that, like each battle round or something.
That'd be great. Like you start with 3, and then like you never re-get 3 every round. You just start with 3, and then you have to bet every round from there. Right. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was flabbergasting to me the first time I read through the mechanic, because there isn't a downside to betting, because the failure state is that you just don't get the dice that you bet. But like I wasn't, like those are just free. So
you always bet that.
Yeah,
you always bet 2, 3 if you're feeling especially frisky.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but that would require, I think, a pretty deep level redesign. The only likely change, I would say, would be an FAQ saying you can only spend like once every attack sequence. Doesn't really work because that's going to be a single attack roll. So I guess probably phase.
Right, or maybe like you can only reroll once for each unit over a phase or something, right? So you can't use them you can't use them all on one Void Weaver unit in one shooting phase, but if your opponent splits fire, now you can open them up. That's a little bit tougher to keep track of, but Games Workshop has never really shied away from good mechanics that have the potential for confusion. So who knows? That might be on the table.
Yeah, all good ideas.
Yeah. We'll have to see. I think it's. Ultimately, it's up to them, and until then, try to do a bunch of mortal wounds because they can't reroll saves against those.
Yep, no, can't do it. Have lots of volume, and ignore AP1 if you can.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Oh, and ignore invul saves. I mean, that rule isn't out there all sorts of places, but
you also can't reroll your saves if you can't take saves. So.
Yeah, like the High Tyrant that can ignore invul saves. That's awesome. Again, Thousand Suns, Death Hex, just turn off invul saves. Awesome. Anything that turns off invul saves, also great.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all I had to talk about today. Zach, do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to give before we wrap things up?
Yeah, send GW positive vibes. They're doing better than they have before, and
that's certainly the case. Yeah.
We love the game, and that has to mean we love them, right? So
absolutely.
Those are my closing thoughts.
Awesome. Well, Zach, congratulations again on taking down Adepticon 2022. That's one of the biggest tournaments of the year, so certainly a big old feather in your cap. So congratulations for that, and thanks so much for coming on and talking to me about your games.
Happily. Hopefully, I'll see you out there on the TacticalTortoise games.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll have to get a game sometime.
Yes.
I want to try this Maliceptor. I want to see how well this Maliceptor does against those.
That's pretty good.
All right, man. Well, take it